Take it away, Linda.
Okay, welcome everybody. I'm Linda Nickel. I'm in Austin, Texas. I'm happy to see so many people that I do not know here. That's the highlight of my day. I love meeting new people, and I love that you guys took a few minutes out of your day to join us. I know you're here for Valerie, but I'm going to pretend it's for me too. So we're going to do these presentations as long as people tune in, and it's informal. So I've got some speakers lined up. We're going to start with next week, Robert McGee. If you follow Instagram Texas, he's one of their hosts. And Robert is a real estate hotel resort photographer by trade, and he does food photography. So he's going to do a presentation next week. Is that me? On food. So,
Hold on, Linda. I'll go mute them.
Okay.
Reach my fiance. The phone's at like.
You muted me though. Oh, I'm back. Sorry. And then the following week, and I'm going to list these on my social media, so you don't have to follow me, but just go look at Cousin Linda, COZN Linda, and you'll be able to see the lineup. So the week of the 13th, Ruth Hoyt is a wildlife guide, photographer. She's a writer. You want to switch that, Erin?
Sorry.
Yeah.
My bad.
And so she is down in South Texas, and she does a lot of, she works with ranchers and a little bit of teaching, a little bit of conservation, but if you're into wildlife, specifically birds, I know she's a wildlife photographer, but her birds are fantastic. So she's going to join us, and she's going to give us a virtual tour of what the bird blinds look like at a working ranch for her workshops. And she's going to also give us some tips on how we can do our own outdoor photography, quote unquote, studio in our backyard to capture the critters that come through. The week after that is the 20th. Michael Rung. I took this photo of him, and I think he should use it for his profile pic. Michael Rung is a Fort Worth photographer, and he offers workshops teaching Lightroom. So Michael's going to join us and share with us some of his favorite tips and tricks, and walk through how his process, his workflow through Lightroom. So the following week, Jama Pantel is going to come back. Jama was our brave soldier. She went first when we first started the little happy hours, and this time she's going to do one on how to pose for a camera. And that's what that means is when you're trying to take your own photo, she's going to kind of give you some tips on if you're stuck trying to take a selfie. She's going to show you how to take a really good selfie. But really, times right now, I know the world is starting to open up, but there are a lot of people that need their own headshots. So she's going to give you some tips on how you can snap one for yourself. The following week, Sherry Hunt, and I looked for a picture of Sherry Hunt, and all the pictures I have of her are really bad. We did an all-nighter. This is the all-nighter. We started at sunset, and we went all the way through sunrise. We were hot, sweaty, sticky mess, and nobody had makeup on, and this is the best picture of us. We were in silhouette up against the Milky Way. And Sherry's gonna join us and give us it's really a beginner class on how to plan, how to figure out what you need to get your own Milky Way shots. So obviously, these little classes are very short, so you're not gonna get a lot of information. It's just a teaser, but I'm hoping that you'll go to these people's websites, their social media, look them up. A lot of these people, do I know everybody? I think I know everybody personally, are friends of mine. And ask them questions. And if they ignore you, that's probably because they don't know who you are. So shoot me a message and I'll say, hey, you got a message from so-and-so, check it out. So with that, Valerie Hoffman is become a dear friend of mine, and she is so sick of me. We have talked just about every day for the last week, it seems. But I met Valerie at a out of Chicago workshop about 2 years ago, and she sent out a message to people and said, hey, I'm here early. Does anybody want to go and shoot? And nobody, took her up on that. And I'm like, I'm here early and I want to go play. And we had a great time just kind of palling around. And, I learned a lot from her in those 2-3 days that I was just, had her one-on-one. And she's fun and she's funny. And recently we went on a trip to Las Vegas. She said, hey, a friend was supposed to go with me and couldn't or can't. You're the only person I know that might say yes. And I'm like, oh yeah, I'll go. So we traipsed through Las Vegas and saw the weirdos, and we got some great night shots, and Vegas is Vegas. And, but we had a lot of fun exploring Valley of Fire State Park. And I consider her, when I look at her stuff, I love her landscapes because that's something that I'm trying to learn and get better at. And so I loved having that time with you, Valerie. So thank you very much for coming on. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Valerie. Her topic tonight is, what is your topic? Creating images with great impact. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you. And then afterwards, we're going to anybody, seriously, ask her questions. Take advantage, of people that are speaking. Hit them up. This is a good time to learn, and there's a lot of people here. So if she doesn't know the answer, somebody else will. So take it away, Valerie.
Thanks, Linda. My pleasure. Hey, Erin, first, what do you see my screen?
I see.
No, I don't. So Valerie, down at the bottom, you'll see a green icon that says share screen.
Well, hang on. When you unshared the screen from the gentleman eating the cake, I lost the whole Zoom screen.
Oh.
So, now I have, all right. So now I have the speaker view. Here we go.
There we go.
It totally disappeared. Okay. All right, here we go.
Speaker view, Valerie. There we go.
Hang on, what?
Yeah, you're good. You're good.
But I only see me.
That's fine.
You see the screen though? Okay. Okay, we're good. It's just different than we had for the last 100 hours. All right. So I wanted to do just a couple quick tips on how to maybe create images that have more impact. So there's a couple different ways. I picked 10, maybe 11 different topics that I thought could help. And they could help anyone with whatever equipment you have. So it's not about equipment. It's almost never about equipment. It's really about, your understanding of how to use the gear and just, your level of creativity, and hopefully a couple other tips that I can show you here. So the first one would have to do with aperture and shallow depth of field. So I think you guys can all see right up here. Hang on, I'm gonna tab this out. So there, I'm gonna keep my shooting information up so you can kind of get an idea of, how the image was shot. So a lot of us, especially if you're out in bright sunlight, you might just leave the camera set the way it is, and you might end up shooting with a smaller aperture, which will give you a lot of depth of field. And, this will depend on what lens you have, how much depth of field and everything you'll have. But so this was at f13. But what if I want to isolate, these flowers and draw your attention a little more? Because I don't know about your eyes, but you're probably maybe looking around the scene. So whenever I set up an image, I usually will shoot at a variety of different apertures. So then I went from 13 to f8 on this one. And you can see how now the background's going nice and soft. And then at 5/6, you just have this nice soft painterly background. Excuse me. And I've done a little, I lowered the camera angle, and I'm kind of doing a little bit of a shoot through, which I'll talk about in a minute. So you have, I think, a more pleasing photograph here. And then even down to f3.5, and you have like a really nice shallow depth of field. So I'm going to give you a couple more examples here. Sunflower field, f22. I'm using a 7200 zoom lens, and I'm pretty close to this flower. So already there's a minimized depth of field. But as I keep going to a wider aperture, so with this one, f11, f2.8, look how that totally, it's the same background, but all I did was change the aperture. And so you can create some really beautiful backgrounds yourself just by playing around with that. And, you know, I like to say whenever you shoot a horizontal, that's a good time to try vertical as well. Here's another example, flowers in Longwood Gardens. And there was some, you know, really bright green shrubbery in the background, but it was really distracting. And I just really wanted this pastel-y, bright green background behind the flowers. So I shot it, and this was with the macro lens. So down at 3.5 and just had the soft background. And then the next two are kind of, I feel like they're almost like Monet paintings. This one was with an 18-400 lens and shot at f8. So you get, again, the nice, soft, colorful background. And then this one with my Tamron 180 macro, almost wide open. So again, nice, soft background. And it just renders the flowers out. Another one, just some of the cactus. Again, at Longwood Gardens. I miss that garden right now. This was just some street scene. So again, getting close, using a wider aperture, and see how your eye goes right here to the sharpest point, which is one of the tips that I want to give you. So our eye is drawn to the sharpest part of the image. So you want to make sure that what you want people to look at is definitely what you focus on and is in sharp. And you'll go there and then maybe just wander around the scene. So it'll keep the eye wherever it's sharp, okay? Does anybody know what this is?
A slinky?
Oh, you're so smart. Yeah, this is one of the
Oh, it
colored,
is? It really is a slinky?
yeah, it really is. It's one of the colored, bigger plastic ones. And I'm in really close with 100 macro, wide open aperture. And just as I was kind of playing around, just got these really cool, just lines and, you know, shapes. And then another lens that I think is very underrated and a ton of fun is a 50mm lens. So I have the 1.4 version, and I did a photo walk, which Deb was with me on that, where we shot the whole time with just the widest aperture. And if you shoot at a hard angle to your subject, so you're not parallel, but you add an angle. So I just focused right here on the US male part, and look at how the depth of field disappears there. Same with this Coca-Cola box. And then if you're gonna have a creepy snake, might as well do something kind of fun with him. So he was right up against the glass in an aquarium, just focused right on his eye and let everything else go out. So again, where is your eye drawn, but it's drawn directly to his eye. And then the last one, I think here's a good example of why you want to be really careful where you do focus. So I think that I'd rather, like my eye kind of goes here first, if you can see my cursor moving around, but I really had my focus down here in the corner. This is sharp, but you know, I think the center of focus maybe should have been up a little further. So you just want to be real careful when you're shooting wide open where you actually focus. Just like I'm sure Jamin would say, for portraits, you want to make sure that the eye is sharp, even if you're doing something creative with your aperture. And then kind of along the same lines is another tip, and that would be to move in close. So whatever drew your eye to the subject, in this case, I really like the veins in the leaves. So instead of having whatever else, now this is in a gardens, you know, showing in the sky or whatever, if you just move in really close and just show the veins, the, you know, the leading lines, whatever.
Hey Val, can I get you to expand your screen all the way? Is it, because I'm distracted by all the stuff on your desktop.
Oh,
There you go.
How's that?
Perfect.
Okay, sorry about that. All right, so here's another example where what drew my eye, this is a tulip, and what drew my eye were the drops. It was right after rain and just the little red edge. So I did a bunch of pictures where I was showing the whole tulip, but it was still not conveying what I was feeling. And so just moving in close just on that part that drew my eye, you know, I really like how this picture turned out. Again, a cactus, and I just really like kind of the tip and the sharp little thorns there. So moving in close and back to the shallow depth of field, letting everything else just kind of go out. Back of flowers can be really pretty. Again, just moving close. So it's just kind of colors and lines. This was actually part of a magnolia flower. And I just, what drew my eye was the really pretty curve there. So I just moved in really close and then cropped it a little more just to show that one part of the flower. On this one, this is a tulip with, I don't know what kind it is, but with these little edges that really looked like teeth. And since that was what drew my eye, that's what I really wanted to draw attention to in my image. So real close with the macro lens. And then here's a couple examples. So early morning, drawn to the dewdrops on the flower. And that's a pretty close shot, but is that as close as we can get? Look around, and I have another flower where the drops dripping down. I thought that was really pretty, so got in close there and then moved in even a little closer. So I think one of the #1 mistakes, especially for beginners, but I think the #1 mistake in all of composition is that we just don't get close enough to fill the frame. You don't always have to show the entire flower. This just, the complementary colors, the green against the pinkish magenta is kind of neat. Another edge to a flower. Another creepy animal. So the eye of the snake is what really, I love the green, but I really love the eye. So just got in really close, 100mm macro, and just got the eye. One of the things that I like to do is I have a little project where I shoot animal parts, for lack of a better word, but I have eyes, I have, scales, whatever. So that could be a fun project to challenge yourselves to maybe pick just, things to focus on, eyes, feet, whatever. So at one point I was changing a lens inside one of the reptile houses, and I had my back right up against the glass, and I really felt like something was looking at me. And I turned around, and there was this alligator, crocodile, whatever he is, right up against the glass. He scared me to death, but I quickly got my macro lens on there and got just the teeth. And I think by shooting then at the wide aperture at 2.8, then it's really all about the teeth, which is what had just terrified me a minute ago. So some little duck's feet. So the cool thing about him was his little webbing. And then just a couple more quick examples, just, outside, maybe a door handle. If you think that's cool, moving close. Car parts, I love moving close. Even something as huge as Niagara Falls, you could give it a whole different perspective by just isolating a small part of it. Doorknob or some designs on the door. And even with the guitar player, I love the bright colors of this guitar. So I moved on in close and just eliminated everything else. All right, so third tip would be also for composition, and just look for framing. So it's pretty obvious if you have a window and you have kind of a neat scene that you can place yourself inside the room and photograph outside. So in this case, there's another one. So you can look for regular windows, you can look for arches. They could be natural, or it can be something that you just find in nature, whether it by trees or whatever. So here's at Winter Tour Gardens in Delaware, inside this little gazebo looking out at the tulips, at the daffodils, early spring. And I don't know if anybody's ever been to Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia, but here's kind of a neat framing where you're looking through into the hospital cell block, and you're just looking through this cross on there. And here's another example, back to look at the difference between aperture choices. And there isn't a right or wrong. I kind of like both of them. So this is where you want to play around with your images. Some more framing could be doorways. I would think when you have a frame though, you want to make sure that you're looking through into something, that will draw your eye. Like, so here you're going through the door and into the chair. Here, this is a cell block at Eastern State Penitentiary, and your eye is drawn, it's kind of framing the tree growing through the wall. Here is a door with another stone arch and some ivy around it. And then there were a ton of compositions here, which I like to challenge myself to not move to another subject till I find maybe 10 different compositions. So here's just a different angle. You have the same door, but now this circular wall. and then here showing that last arch. So, you know, be on the lookout for different archways, things to frame. You can use foliage to frame. Shoot some verticals, shoot some horizontals. And then ones that are not as natural, I might almost call this a shoot through, which I'll go through in a little bit, but I was standing again at Longwood Gardens shooting through a tree that they had made out of these flowers. But we also have this frame coming with the poinsettia and then this little fern overhanging there. And here's just some foliage and the tree branches helping to frame this gazebo. Here, just by using kind of a low camera angle, you have the framing of all the flowers around the fountain. Some leaves framing the waterfall. And this is in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. Just some lights framing a Christmas tree at an outdoor display. And then look at that sexy lady back there. So I can't hear everybody laugh, but so there I had myself wedged into an arch.
I did not approve this at all.
Yeah, well.
Very
So
happy.
I had myself wedged into some, you know, kind of arch I was trying to play around with. And I looked out and there was Linda up on the hill. And so I just thought that was kind of a neat image as well. So you can use any kind of things that you can find to frame. But one of the best times to definitely frame or look for framing is when you have like a bald sky or something, some element that you want to eliminate. Like here, I even positioned myself that there was almost no sky showing, so there wasn't that distraction. Come on, you rock, Linda. All right.
So outlined by boulders.
I mentioned shoot throughs a couple times. And when I first showed people this image, they said, is that Photoshopped? And obviously they didn't know me very well because I do not contain or have a single brain cell that can understand Photoshop. So this was simply using a 180 macro lens, and it's all pink tulips. It's just a patch. This is in Holland, Michigan. And I'm up really close to other pink tulips, but I'm focusing, I got this little break in focusing on the one in the background. So almost wide open aperture, right in close, and everything else just kind of causes a nice frame. So that's another way to do some framing in arches. I probably should have had this in the other one, but again, framing, shoot through. So this is in Santa Barbara up in the mountains. And I love this. I think it's an oak tree. I just love the way it was reaching down to the ground and just kind of used that as a foreground element to shoot right through. The next two shots are similar to that first one where this is up in the San Ynez Mountains above Santa Barbara, and I'm shooting through. This whole soft effect is not breathing on the lens. It's not too hot out. It's just shooting through other poppies with almost wide open aperture in this. And then just finding a subject to focus on. And it just gives a real pretty painterly effect. I struggle a lot to try and find the perfect flower where it would work that is a neat subject to shoot through, but sometimes you get lucky. So here again at Longwood Gardens, kind of a neat thing, just shooting through whatever this plant is. I'm not very good with my plant names. Also at their Christmas display. And let me know if I'm going too fast or too slow, but shooting through one of the lighted Christmas trees at several other trees in the background. Shooting through some sunflowers. And then a couple orchid shots where, again, the softness is just with flowers right up against the lens for there. So when you can find the right subject, you can create some really neat effects with that technique. And again, you really just need to kind of open your aperture wide open and get something real close to the lens. Okay, so another thing that I like to, you know, include or not is people. So people really add perspective, but let me start even with this image. So I was hiking in the Columbia River Gorge a number of years ago, and I was waiting to take a picture of this waterfall, and this father and this son, I assume, were standing there. And I'm like, and they just took forever, and they weren't moving, and they were on my nerves. And I sat down, I'm like, when are they ever going to leave? Because I generally don't like people in my pictures. But then the father bent down to zip up the jacket on the little boy. And it seemed like such a intimate, like a special moment, that really was part of the picture. And even though they're small, I just think that's a neat part of it. So I've tried to learn that people aren't always a bad addition to the images. This is Miners Castle in Michigan's Upper Peninsula, and I was ready to take a picture of this, and all of a sudden all these kayakers came through, and I was going to wait, and then I thought, no, like, look at the perspective they give, because you would have no idea how big this rock formation is without these kayakers, and the complementary colors really add to it too, I think.
Before you go on, Val, let me ask a question. Dave Valdez, his question is, are you on manual focus with your shoot throughs?
No, I don't think I've ever done that well in manual focus. It's very hard. So it's the same as with macro, where I really am just focusing myself, because otherwise the lens would just be searching and going in and out.
So I'm sorry. So the answer is yes, you do.
The answer is no, I'm on manual focus.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's a good question, because yeah, trying to do it in autofocus would be very hard because of, you know, your camera might, depending on where your focus point is. I mean, if you want to move it around and you can get it right on your subject, that might work. But I find it just quicker, especially with live view, just focus right on where you want it to be. Here was another one. I was on a workshop in the Oregon coast, and there were these beautiful rays of light coming through in the early morning with the mist. And some of the workshop attendees were standing there, and I was waiting and waiting for them to move. But, you know, then the little smart bug landed and said, take the picture, because that really adds, I think, some impact to it with them staring up right at the light and kind of in the light's path.
Another question on your shoot. Do you shoot aperture priority?
A lot of times I do start on aperture priority, and that's probably where most of these are. Yep. And I'll show you later when I'm not in aperture priority. In this scene, this is Cape of Good Hope in South Africa. And again, you would have no idea how big this area is without, these are people down there. So without seeing the little people all the way down there to give it some sense of scale. And this one, this was just a bonus I was shooting. We were up on Table Mountain right as the clouds were going, you know, like we were above the clouds. And it wasn't actually until I looked at this shot after I had taken it that I saw this little guy right there. Oh, I guess I can't do that. Little person right there photographing his wife, which was Rover here. And again, that just gives it this pretty cool sense of scale. Another one where I was agitated that this person wouldn't get out of the scene. And then I decided to shoot it anyway. And I absolutely love, again, having the small person staring up at this massive waterfall. This one was pretty fun. I was at a garden in Trenton, New Jersey called Grounds for Sculpture, and they had these massive sculptures by Seward Johnson. And so, you know, it was just kind of fun, but again, you would kind of have no idea. And this couple walked up and stepped up onto the platform there and did the exact same pose for their friends to photograph. And I just thought that that was, you know, that was really the wow part of the image, the bonus. The next couple of images real quick are from Pennhurst Asylum, which is supposed to be one of the more haunted places in the country. And we were doing a photo tour there. Oh, I lie, this one's from Eastern State Penitentiary, also one of the most haunted places in the country. And I was using a slow shutter speed, and these people just kind of walked into my long exposure, but they kind of look eerie like ghosts, and changing it to black and white, I think enhanced that a little bit more. But this one is at Pennhurst, and I was doing a really long exposure because it was really dark in here, and somebody just happened to walk in at the end at the doorway there, and that kind of just really kind of gave it this otherworldly kind of creepy effect.
Jamie is asking, shooting handheld?
No. So some of these might be grounds for sculpture. This one might be, but 99% of my landscapes are on a tripod. So unless I'm somewhere where I can't be, this one actually, I'm leaning on a railing because I'm up on a platform and I couldn't get my tripod to be shooting over at that angle. But definitely this one, yeah, so most of the rest. I think all the South Africa ones up on the mountain were not. I don't know that we had a tripod up there. It's a good question. But I do use it for a lot of my shots. Anywhere that I can, I do, because I like to brag that I could take a blurry picture at over 1,000th of a second, meaning that I don't feel that I'm overly, as sharp as I would want my images to be. And last one in the people topic. So at this waterfall, this couple was just kind of sitting up top. And again, I just thought they added more of a center of interest. Like the waterfall's pretty, but I think they kind of, add a little bit of impact to it. So I did then wait for them to finally leave. But now in answer to your question for shutter priority, so here I have switched to aperture priority. So let's talk about shutter speeds now. Shutter speeds can convey motion. You can have some really cool effects just by playing around with them. So I'm a person that loves soft, silky water. So this was a 30-second image. So I'm on a tripod. I'm in the middle of the stream and I have a polarizer and a neutral density so I can get a really long exposure out of that. So to get 30 seconds there. Same with this one. This one was almost 2 minutes long. And one of the neat things is when you do a longer exposure, sometimes, the bubbles in the water can give you some leading lines, so this kind of leads you right through the image. It's kind of a cliche shot, but I love to, look for leaves that are swirling at the base of a waterfall. And if you do a really long exposure there, you'll be able to record that. It's not something that you would see right off the bat. You just kind of have to know to be looking for it. And so this was a 64-second exposure to get that. If you're on the coast, if you set up there as the waves recede, again with a longer exposure, and this is 1/8 of a second, so it's not really long, but the water's moving pretty fast. So you get this nice blur, soft lines going out. And the same with this one too. And this one was at a little over 1 second to get this motion in the water.
Where are you?
This is Oregon coast and it's south of Cannon Beach. This was part of that same workshop where you had the light beams or the sun rays. I don't remember the name of the beach.
Okay. Oregon coast. Got it. Susan Lexman-Welcher, take note. All right, go ahead.
Wait, no, Angela Purcell is asking, what filter do you put on first, ND or polarizer?
I'm not sure that it matters, but I will generally have a polarizer on first and then the neutral density. And especially if you're going to use one of the thicker neutral densities, like a 10 stop, even a 6 stop is pretty hard to see through. So I would set my polarizer first and then hold on to it if you can see me there so it doesn't spin, and then screw on a neutral density filter. I use the round ones. So I would do that first. Good questions. So I like to challenge myself too, to play with shutter speeds just to see what effect I might get. So this is in the fall, it's in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. It's on the Presque Isle River. And I was kind of waiting for the sun to come up over, well, the sun was up, but it wasn't on this river. So when you have in the fall, the river in the shade, and then you have the sun up hitting the tree. So the orange and the blue are the orange yellow leaves, and then the blue from the sky, which this is definitely enhanced a little bit in Lightroom. But I just started at a, like a 500th of a second and just kept dialing down till I got to about 2 seconds. And it was right in this 1/5 of a second where it got this beautiful artistic painterly feel. much slower than this, and it was just a ghosty blur that didn't look good. It was just kind of a mush, and faster was too fast. It didn't feel nearly as artistic. Here's a good example. You go out in the snow. There are two ways that you could convey it. Do you want to, like, if you look at this, what is your feeling? Is this a soft, peaceful, scene? Or is it like a heavy, snowstorm? So I used a faster shutter speed, which is a 2/50th of a second here, and that helps to freeze the snowflakes. So it makes it feel kind of soft and just kind of little fluffy flakes dropping. But if I go to a slower shutter speed, like in this case was a 50th of a second, now you can see the snow blurring and it feels like it's coming down a lot heavier. So you can do the same thing with rain. I don't have any examples here, but by shooting at different shutter speeds, you can give the impression of it being a downpour or just a couple, like a light drizzle. And in this case, we were at a zoo to show shutter speeds on the opposite end of the scale. This duck was just kicking up the water, and I went up to a 500th of a second, and it just kind of froze the drops in the air. Now, I'm a self-proclaimed bird hater, not a bird hater, but I just am not into bird photography at all. And so mostly when I go out to shoot birds, I'm going to get blurry photos anyway. So I've embraced this technique, which I learned from Denise Ippolito, which is to shoot the birds at a slower shutter speed. So this is Middle Creek Wildlife Management, which is in Lancaster County, about 40 minutes from where I live. And we are a big stopover for snow geese in February and March. And so when they were doing their massive takeoff, shot it at a 25th of a second to get that nice soft effect. Go to amusement park. If you just shoot at a faster shutter speed to freeze the action, then you can't even really tell that the ride is moving. But with this wild mouse, if I shoot at a slower shutter speed, like in this case at a 15th of a second, now I'm showing the motion and it makes it feel like it's going very fast, which they do. In this case, I can't tell you just with this image that it's windy, but I could, depict that by using a slower shutter speed, which I'm on anyway to shoot fireworks. But you can tell now with this flag included in the motion that it was a very windy night. And this was like 8 seconds. And then I love to go when there's amusement rides, again, and just play with shutter speeds. So 3 seconds, you get the nice blur of the ride. I like to do the giant Ferris wheels. And in this case, I might have zoomed a little too, which I'll talk about in a little bit, but just in the dark, long exposure, just the motion of the ride. So you wait till it's moving and you get this really neat spirograph effects. This one too, you can see this was one of those rides with the arm and then the cages at each end, and just waited till it got going. This was a 10-second exposure. It took 10 seconds for it to do its full loop. I have a lot where that wasn't all the way around. So you can just do some kind of light painting with amusement rides by using slower shutter speeds. How am I doing on time? Am I getting, all right, I'll buzz through these real quick. Here's one from Vegas. I think this gets enhanced by just doing the car trails, long exposure, and you get the car trails in the beginning there. And then one other thing that you can do that's creative with playing with your shutter speeds is to do some panning. So this is a slow shutter speed, which is a 30th, and these are pro cyclists. So they already would want a faster shutter speed to freeze them. So I'm at a slower shutter speed to get this kind of neat blur, but then I'm also moving with them so that you get the panning. So just the background's out of focus. And then what shutter speed you use depends on how fast your motion is. So a motorcycle going needs a faster shutter speed than, say, people maybe on a bike. Guitar motion, you just have the picker. And then you can, even freeze like some water drops or raindrops. I'm gonna skip. Let me go to this one. I think one of the things that people tend to do is they take their pictures just from standing tall and at eye level. Everything is just at eye level. And if you can change your angle with looking up, looking down, getting low, you can create much more unique pictures. Now, this is the dome of the Pennsylvania State Capitol. I was laying flat on my back underneath that with a security guard 4 feet away. But, you know, how else are you really going to show this? But looking up, now you could have gone up there and got a different view, but I love just the straight up view. Along the same lines of not just standing up, how many of you have pets and you sit there and take pictures of them, you know, from your standing position, or kids? And if you get down, I'm laying flat out on the ground and this dog is running right to me. And that just has so much more impact. Same with this one, little baby duckling laying right on the ground, have a little bit of foliage right against the lens. And it's all about, you know, looking into the little guy's eyes. Low angle here to get a lot of the flowers. This is the backside of the state capitol in Pennsylvania. But again, just looking up can, you know, add a really unique perspective. This is the outside of Eastern State Penitentiary. Just some old shack with all this really neat vines. And the one other thing that I hope that I'll get to show is just the super wide angle, which is something that I love. And I think you can do some really creative things with that. So, here are some examples with that. This is a Rokinon 8mm lens, excuse me. And I'm holding the camera, so no tripod, hand holding it under these tulips, and they're backlit by the sun. And it just gives you this really cool kind of, you get the starburst with the sun. So low angle is pretty impactful. Looking up at the statue. Another one with the Rokinon, which is the fisheye in New York, just looking straight up, getting all the buildings. Straight up the spiral staircase in Maryland. So I love super wide angle and then the whole, you know, looking up angle. You can do some really neat things if you're into architecture, shooting straight up and up. And it gives the perspective that you have a very dominant towering structure or person or whatever there. So I love architecture. I don't know if you can tell that. And I love to play around with different angles. I had a killer sky on this day. So if you have a great sky, you really want to show it. And then just another variation on that building. I think that was almost it. Just a couple more with the super wide angle. This is the Capitol in Michigan. And just, you need, in some cases, just a really wide angle just to be able to get some of these large structures. But what you can do is real low angle. I'm close to these. I was drawn in this scene. I was photographing the waterfall, but I loved the roots of this tree. So I got down really low with a wide angle lens. Here was 20mm. And had that in my foreground. And it actually gives the perspective of being larger than the waterfall, even though it's not even close. You can get low to a rock or leaves in your foreground to accentuate those. In this case, I'm really close to these giant leaves in Oregon, and that waterfall is over 100 feet tall, but just the perspective with the wide angle makes it look like it's just a real tiny thing with these leaves. So again, just kind of looking up super wide, and it'll give, with a wide angle lens, if you keep it straight, for the most part, your lines will be straight, but the minute you point up or down, you start getting these curving lines that can really enhance your images, where it kind of looks like it's, you know, bowing out. Bethlehem steel, they light it up every night. You just put yourself right up against and shoot straight up. And then you even got the stars here. Now this was on a tripod, definitely. Well, most of those were. Vegas. Now here you can see from the fisheye lens where I like to play, and here you get the boat effect on the walls. It's tilted just a little bit. And you have just the curving walls, which I think is kind of a neat effect. In this case, the library had just a really neat ceiling. So there's no point in showing everything at the bottom or the people sitting at the desk. Just point up and capture, you know, what is grabbing your eye. And in this case, again, with the super wide, it really gives that kind of distorted perspective. Fisheye in the National Cathedral. I think it's the National Cathedral.
Yeah.
And last two, just for kind of fun, or a couple just for more creative. So this dog has big eyes anyway, but if you use a wide angle and get really close, it won't look good if you get close to a person, but you know, you can get close to your dog, your cat, whatever. You get those like peephole looks like they make with the greeting cards. So if you can get your pet to actually sit still, this was at a zoo where the giraffes, you were at a feeding platform and they were just waiting there with their tongue out for you to put a little cracker on. So I could have shot that with any lens, but I decided to get my super wide and just kind of, it wasn't super, but, and get up close, and it really makes the tongue look that much bigger. I laid down on the ground during a workshop to show a super wide angle perspective. And so I was just, I don't know, like a foot behind these bocce balls, and look at this, like it looks like they're huge compared to the person in the background. And that's just some of the creative things that you can do with the wide angle. Here's another one. I missed it a little, I messed it up, but I wanted it to look like this guy's feet were like massive, but I kind of didn't line it up right here. Again, this was with a fisheye lens. Am I done? This was my last one if I still have time.
Go ahead and do it.
Okay, so my last thing is weather, because I don't know about you guys wherever you are, but we're having a lot of weather lately, and we're gonna have, you know, heavy rains and flooding tomorrow. But one of the things that can really add, you know, some impact to your images is to get out in weather. So at the times when you want to stay, you know, under a blanket or something are the best times to get out. In this case, Columbia River Gorge, this is Metlaco Falls, and I'm pretty sure that I've read that this is gone from the fires years ago, but early morning and just the mist around it just gives such a beautiful effect. Also in the Columbia River Gorge, I was racing for a sunset, and it was right after a storm had cleared, which there was this amazing light, but look at all the haze and everything in the air, which just adds kind of a neat atmosphere as the storm cleared. Early morning on a lake, and there's all this mist on there. You got this nice backlight. And when you have all this atmosphere, you could be shooting directly into the sun and it still not overpower the image. This is that same scene now with a little Photoshop work to remove the people. And this was about 4 feet away from that scene, looking a different direction. It was just amazing light and rays. If there's rain and you see the sun come out, you should grab your camera and go look for a rainbow. There's bound to be one somewhere. If you can get out safely for lightning, that would be a good thing to try and do. In this case, it wasn't even raining. This was what I call heat lightning, but somebody told me there is no such thing. So, but there were lightning bolts in the sky in the heat when it wasn't raining. Early morning.
Oh, hey, let me interrupt. Jamie wants to know, how do you capture lightning?
I capture lightning the same way. I shoot it the same way I would shoot fireworks, which is camera on a tripod, maybe f8 or 11, probably f11, low ISO, and put it on bulb exposure or 30 seconds. So you could set your camera to continuously take 30-second exposures, and there's a good chance that a bolt, if it's really active, will show up in your scene. Or you could just leave, you know, lock the shutter open with a remote on bulb and just keep it open until you see some bursts. Because if it's totally dark, it doesn't really matter how long you leave it open until you start getting some bursts. And you can see that there were a bunch going on here. So, you know, just longer exposure, but on a tripod.
Are you focusing on infinity?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. last couple. So early morning, it was a really foggy morning. So I went to this local lake and I was, going by the woods. I was in the woods and I heard this talking, but I couldn't find it anywhere. And as I, went through the woods, I saw these guys just almost buried in the fog in their boat. So you want to look for those kind of things. Longwood Gardens at Christmas, there's like 100,000 people there on any given night. So I like to try and choose a night when it's going to rain so that I get these beautiful reflections and the mist and no people because everyone else is in the beer garden, drinking. So get out early morning or after the rain with the flowers. Deb could tell you, I won't tell a story unless we had time, but this lightning strike was actually kind of an accident. This was after a storm where we were trying to shoot lightning, but it kind of cleared, and just this beautiful light. It was a funny story. We almost died. Another rainbow and the neat atmosphere, said Deb. And then last one. So I hate winter. I really do. But I forced myself to go out in the snow because something said to me, I want a picture of buffalo in the snow. And so about 40 minutes away, we have this game preserve. And I went skating on very slippery roads to try and get some shots in this very heavy snow of these guys. And I was happy that I did it. So, all right, that's it. Hit me with questions.
All right. So let me have Erin, let's unmute people.
All right, hold on. I will open it all up. All right, everyone is officially unmuted.
Woohoo. Thank you, Valerie. That was great.
Oh, you're welcome. Let me see if I can see you guys. Yeah, my bottom line would be just if I could put it all together as one is just learn to see differently and see more creatively. And sometimes maybe a lens would help you do it. Definitely a wow factor would be weather, light beams, in your images, but do things differently. Don't do it like everyone else. Choose a different camera angle, find something more creative.
Valerie,
Stop
Yes.
sharing your
here.
for a second, please.
What's that?
Stop
As
sharing.
you here, I
Stop sharing.
especially liked.
Hang on just 1 second. Valerie, can you stop sharing
Yep.
your screen? There you go. There we go. Sorry, excuse me. Go
I
ahead.
couldn't.
Okay, I especially liked you talking about the wide angle lens because I have a super wide angle and I don't use it much except for landscape. And your creative ideas are just now simmering in my head. So
Thank you.
thank you so much for the presentation.
Yeah, I love it. And it's good you said that because I have so many students, that they have a wide angle and they hate it. Like they don't know what to do with it except to get more in the scene, but they don't feel the creative, aspect of it. And it is, something that you have to acquire with your eye. You could, I didn't put that picture in. Would be one that said, show me how to get something, cooler with a wide angle. And we did that. A lot of you probably saw Linda's shot of the road in Valley of Fire with the yellow lines where we had the camera right on the ground, basically. Forgot to put that in. So thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I was going to say, it's like, we're going to have to clean up.
So Valerie,
Actually, I'm not muted anymore.
Valerie, do you, I see that you teach classes. Are you out on paid assignments also? What do you do with that?
I am not. So I am an educator here. I lead workshops at least once or twice a month on location to these. I think everything you saw here was someplace that we've been as a group.
Okay.
And then I've also done one in Michigan's Upper Peninsula, working on Texas.
So
But
yeah,
nobody has paid me yet to go on assignment, except for like website photography and that.
Yeah.
I'm working really hard to get her to Texas to do a workshop. So give me a
So
little
am I.
Yeah.
So am I, Linda.
Maybe at the next,
Now, Texas.
maybe at the next
Blue
Georgetown,
bonnets.
Texas Photography Festival.
Yeah, I love it.
David, I can make that happen.
I love to travel. I mean, I'm trying to make the most in my backyard. We do lots of museums and local things. And Pennsylvania has a ton, but certainly when I went to Valley of Fire, I got to start traveling. That's it.
We had a great time, yeah.
So you just saw everybody saying that they want you here
All right, let's
in
do it.
Texas.
Let's do it. Set me up. Tell me what you need.
I mean, look,
Shoot birds.
there's
Ask me to shoot
you're
birds.
flooding the chat boards. We need you here.
For people that don't know, Tamara is a sales rep for Vision Camera here in Austin. So
Yeah, we're working on something. We'll work something out.
Yep.
David, I'll put in bids for you. We'll get whatever you need.
Yeah,
So-
I'd love it. I've done presentations, did one for out of Chicago last year. Do a lot of camera clubs and that. I'm certainly not a big name, but I'm trying. So
Valerie, how much do you use that 18-400 Tamron?
I use it pretty often if I'm just going for like a one lens kind of deal, or if I'm in inclement weather where I don't want to be switching lenses.
Man, I love your shots from that. They're super, super sharp.
Yeah, I don't only use it, but sometimes, man, that is a great, even like a macro close-up lens, because it focuses very close.
Oh, it really does.
You
I'm
could just
really
use that
impressed.
lens and go.
So, Valerie, there's a question. What lenses do you carry around with you?
In my bag, I will always have so I shoot with the Canon 7D Mark II, so it's a crop sensor camera. And so I use the 11-16 Tokina lens. So that's always in my bag because I love finding creative ways to use that. And then either I'll have the 18-400 or I might have the Canon 24-105. So it would always be those two for sure. When I go to the gardens, I throw in that Rokinon lens so I can do the neat tulip shots, the real low angle shots. That almost, when I'm able, I will throw that in the bag when weight isn't an issue. I use that at museums and cars and things to do neat things. I have a 100-400 and a 70-200 2.8 that don't get lugged around very much until somebody makes me go for birds or something, and because they're just heavy and big. So really just the super wide angle and a mid-range for the most part. Next.
Excellent.
Anybody else? Denny?
No, that was just excellent. I was just going to say, what would be, because I don't have a lot of lenses. I've got 18-300 and then a smaller one, but no wide angle or anything like that. What would the most versatile one be and one that you probably would use most commonly?
The one that you have would be the most versatile.
Okay.
You would use most time.
How about to add to my little collection,
Yeah.
my meager collection?
The super wide is, to do those unique shots. I mean, it's certainly if you have a big building, you want more in, but to get that really neat perspective.
Okay.
And the Rokinon that I have, I bought specifically for star trails so that I could get more sky in it. And it's a 3.5, I think. So it's pretty good.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Valerie, thank you very much. This was,
Linda,
I've been getting a lot of comments going, I'm really excited about her presentation. And, I adore you, even though you give me crap a lot.
Wait. What do you guys think that know Linda? Who do you think gives more crap? The very last text you sent me was something mean that didn't have a smiley face attached to it. That said, whatever, I'm here to help you, not give you the warm fuzzies. Right there it is. So, yeah.
Okay, with that, Pennsylvania. Thank you guys
That's so Linda.
Yeah. I'm not here to give you the warm fuzzies. Shut up and do something right. That was
it's like, gosh, I have to pound it into her. Guys, especially you guys from the East Coast, thank you guys for jumping in. I know this is kind of a weird, who are these people and what are they doing? But I've been harping on Val to do a little presentation. And if you guys don't follow her on social media, look for her at Valerie Hoffman Photography. That's her Instagram account.
Just followed it.
Yeah, she is brand new to Instagram. I've been working on her. I'm the reason.
I'm over a year old now, thanks to you. So.
Oh my God. So, but she's also got a Facebook account, Valerie A. Hoffman Photography, if you're a Facebook user. She has a website that she's on there a bit too. So look for her. She's a good person to know, and I'm
So Val, are you still doing your calendars?
Yes, ma'am, every year.
Oh my God, her calendars, you guys.